It was never a metaphor. That was the last translation before Dr. Helena Farrow vanished. The hieroglyphs had been dismissed for centuries, another poetic tribute to the goddess Hathor, her celestial beauty compared to the cradle of stars. But Helena's breakthrough changed everything. It wasn't a mere allegory. The ancient Egyptians had documented something real, a nebula. One that modern astronomers couldn't explain. The Nebula of Hathor wasn't mapped, yet the coordinates extracted from the temple walls of Dendra were precise. A nebula where the goddess whispers to the unborn. NASA had no choice but to act. A deep space probe, Hathor 1, was launched into the void beyond the Orion Spur, following the star maps of a civilization 4,000 years dead. The transmission logs were normal until they weren't. 9 months into the mission, Hathor 1 stopped responding. Then, without warning, it resumed broadcasting, except the data was impossible. It wasn't just scanning gas and dust. It was detecting heartbeat-like pulses. Something was alive inside the nebula. A manned expedition followed. A crew of 6 boarded the Osiris, a quantum-drive vessel designed for long-haul exploration. When they entered the Nebula of Hathor, the stars around them dimmed. The nebula was different from anything they had encountered, less of a cloud, more of a veiled cocoon. Then came the first sighting. Through the ship's viewport, Lieutenant Wren saw it first, a planet forming in real time. Chunks of rock assembled in slow, deliberate motion, like pieces of a puzzle drawn together by an unseen hand. But it wasn't gravity. It was something else. Then the whispers began. Not over comms. Not through ship diagnostics. Inside their heads. You were never meant to come here. Captain Idris tried to abort the mission, but the ship wouldn't respond. Osiris was drifting, being pulled toward something vast. The nebula itself began to shift, revealing colossal structures within geometric forms too precise to be natural. The crew realized too late what they had found. This was no ordinary nebula. It was a nursery for planets, worlds not born from physics alone but engineered. By whom? And then the pulse stopped. Something had noticed them. And it was waking up. The ship's warning klaxons blared as the Osiris's systems flickered erratically. The crew scrambled, hands flying over controls, but nothing responded. We're being scanned, Lieutenant Wren whispered, his voice hollow with disbelief. On the main screen, the swirling nebula began to rearrange itself. Thick clouds of cosmic dust peeled away, revealing colossal tendril-like structures, not natural formations, but living conduits pulsating with golden energy. They extended across the void like an ancient circulatory system, connecting dozens of embryonic planets, each one in a different stage of creation. This isn't just a nursery, Dr. Reyes, the astrophysicist, muttered. This is a sudden, thunderous pulse rattled the ship. The crew screamed as gravitational forces bent the Osiris violently sideways. The nebula was reacting to them. And then the whispering returned. But this time it wasn't a warning. You are intruding on the cycle. Captain Idris grabbed onto the nearest console. Identify yourself. He barked, but the whisper only grew in intensity. It was not a voice in the traditional sense, more like a memory forced into their minds. Then, as though a veil had been lifted, the truth of the Nebula of Hathor unfolded before them. It wasn't a nebula at all. It was an incubator. A carefully regulated birthing chamber for planets, worlds not left to random formation, but seeded, nurtured and cultivated by something far older than humanity. We are the architects. The voice didn't belong to a single being. It was a chorus. A collective intelligence that had long since abandoned physical form. The ancient architects had woven this nebula into existence, tending to planets like living embryos, ensuring the perfect conditions for life. But the most disturbing revelation came next. The Earth had been one of them. You were meant to sleep until your time of awakening. Dr. Reyes's breath hitched. Oh my God, they're saying Earth was artificially created just like these planets. A cold, inhuman silence followed. And then the whisper turned into a command. Leave. The nebula trembled. The planetary embryos began to shift, their formations slowing, rearranging like a vast, unknowable mechanism recalibrating. The crew felt the pressure build around them like an unseen force was pushing them away. Captain Idris shouted over the alarms. Engage emergency FTL. Get us out of here. Helm Officer Rourke fought the ship's failing systems, struggling to comply. Engaging. And then everything stopped. The ship froze mid-motion. The stars blinked out. Something huge was materializing in front of them. A vessel, if it could even be called that. It was vast beyond comprehension, its silhouette spanning across the entire nebula, dwarfing the planets themselves. It wasn't built, it had grown, its structure pulsing with ancient, unknown energy. Ren choked on his words. That's impossible. A terrible realization crept over the crew. They weren't just being expelled. They were being examined. The architects were deciding what to do with them. Whether they should be allowed to leave. Or whether humanity should be returned to the cycle to sleep once more. The colossal vessel organism loomed before them, its surface shifting like liquid metal, flowing with iridescent pulses. It wasn't just a ship, it was something alive. The Osiris's systems were locked down, the controls unresponsive. "We're trapped," whispered Lieutenant Ren. The whispers in their minds became structured, words morphing into something resembling language. "You were meant to remain undisturbed. You were meant to evolve according to the plan." Dr. Reyes gripped the table, her voice barely a breath. "They're saying Earth was a controlled experiment." Captain Idris's jaw clenched. "Then why did they let us develop?" "Pause." The architect's collective voice resonated again. "We did not." A wave of nausea hit the crew as the nebula shifted around them, the tendril-like conduits stretching, curling, forming what looked like a vast celestial hand reaching toward their ship. They weren't just observing anymore. They were assessing. And then, without warning, the Osiris's comm system crackled to life. A transmission not from the architects. From Earth. "This is Mission Control, broadcasting on emergency subspace frequencies. Osiris, do you copy? We intercepted a burst transmission from your location. What is your status?" Captain Idris exhaled sharply. "We copy, Earth. We're..." The moment he spoke, the whispers cut off. A new sensation flooded the crew. A presence was scanning the incoming signal, dissecting it, analyzing every wave of human speech. The nebula pulsed brighter, and the vast alien entity before them seemed to quiver, as if experiencing shock for the first time in its existence. The architects had heard something that disturbed them. Something unexpected. "You are not alone." Dr. Reyes paled. "They thought we were isolated." The Osiris's sensors lit up, picking up dozens, no hundreds of new gravitational distortions within the nebula. Other ships were emerging. Not human. Not even architect-made. Something else had been watching. And now it had arrived. The nebula began to collapse inward, planets freezing mid-formation, the golden conduits splintering apart. The architect's collective voice turned to urgency. "Leave now. This place is no longer safe." The great tendrils released the Osiris, and suddenly, violently, they were moving. An unseen force hurled them out of the nebula, past the collapsing planetary nursery, past the newborn worlds that would now never be completed. Their ship tumbled into open space, the nebula shrinking behind them as it folded into itself, the entire structure disappearing into darkness. The stars returned. The whispers were gone. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Ren swallowed. "What the hell just happened?" Captain Idris turned to Dr. Reyes, his face grim. "They weren't the only ones who made us." Silence fell over the cabin as the weight of the truth sank in. Humanity wasn't just an experiment. It was a contested project. And now something else had woken up to claim them. The Osiris drifted in eerie silence, the hum of its systems slowly rebooting. The crew sat frozen, their minds still reeling from what they had just witnessed. Something else had been watching them. Something that even the architects feared. Captain Idris's fingers hovered over the comm panel. "Mission Control, do you copy?" His voice was hoarse. "Static. Then, we copy. Osiris, what the hell happened out there?" "We lost your signal for 5 minutes. Telemetry shows an anomaly collapsed around you." 5 minutes? Idris exchanged glances with Dr. Reyes. They had been inside the nebula for over 36 hours. Time had folded inside the nursery. Dr. Reyes stepped forward, her mind racing. "Mission Control, you need to tell us, have there been any anomalies near Earth's orbit? Unexplained gravitational shifts, unknown signals?" There was a long silence. Then a different voice took over. A voice filled with barely contained urgency. "This is Admiral Kessler of the Defense Initiative." "Who am I speaking to?" Idris stiffened. The Defense Initiative? Why was a high-ranking military official suddenly involved? "Dr. Reyes, lead astrophysicist aboard the Osiris," she answered carefully. Kessler's voice hardened. "We need you to return to Earth immediately." We've detected something. Multiple somethings. A weight settled in Idris's chest. Approximately 48 hours ago, an unknown fleet entered the outer solar system. It appeared just beyond Neptune's orbit, no drive signatures, no transponder codes. Ren's stomach dropped. A fleet? They aren't moving toward Earth. Not yet. They're just sitting there. Watching. No one spoke. No one breathed. The implications were clear. The architects hadn't just warned them. They had abandoned them. And whatever had forced them to retreat had now arrived at Earth's doorstep. Dr. Reyes slowly sat down, her hands shaking. We weren't supposed to leave the cycle, she whispered. Something else wanted us to evolve freely. Idris tightened his grip on the controls, jaw clenched. And now it's come to check on its creation. A proximity alert screamed through the cabin. The crew turned toward the viewport. And there, emerging from the folds of space, was a ship. Not like the architect's living structures. Not organic. This one was cold, metallic, precise. And it was waiting. The comm crackled. A voice, ancient, layered, synthetic, spoke directly into their minds. You were never theirs to keep. And then, the ship opened its doors. The metallic vessel loomed before the Osiris, its surface shifting as though adapting to their presence. Unlike the organic, pulsing structures of the architects, this ship was rigid, its geometry too perfect, its symmetry unnatural. It wasn't just a construct, it was a statement. A claim. Something else had been shaping humanity all along. The voice resonated in their minds again, layered in multiple tones, almost mechanical yet disturbingly familiar. Come, see the truth. A low vibration ran through the Osiris, not an attack, not a scan, but an invitation. Captain Idris clenched his fists. No one moves. We don't know what we're dealing with. Dr. Reyes, pale but resolute, shook her head. We do know. We just don't want to admit it. She pointed at the ship. The architects fled. But these things, they stayed. That means they've been here longer. Ren swallowed hard. Long enough to claim us? A slow, mechanical aperture irised open on the alien vessel's hull, revealing an inner chamber of shifting metal and pulsing blue energy. A docking bay. The invitation had become a command. They were expected. A new signal burst through their comms this time. It wasn't just in their minds. It was spoken, processed through their own linguistic algorithms. Your return was inevitable. The words hit like a hammer. Idris gritted his teeth. What does that mean? You were not abandoned. You were hidden. The crew exchanged looks, the weight of those words sinking in. Dr. Reyes inhaled sharply. Oh God, we weren't just an experiment. We were a secret. The Nebula of Hathor wasn't just a nursery. It was a vault. A place where select planets were left to develop, undisturbed. Humanity had been removed from the game board. But someone had found them. And now they were here to collect. The docking bay pulsed brighter. An impatient summons. Idris turned to his crew. Options. Silence. There was no fight. No escape. Ren's voice was barely above a whisper. We go. With a final deep breath, Captain Idris activated the ship's thrusters. The Osiris moved forward, its fate sealed. The moment they crossed the threshold, the aperture snapped shut behind them. The ship vanished. And across the solar system the waiting fleet began to move. The moment the Osiris passed into the alien ship, gravity shifted. The crew lurched forward as a new force took hold, subtle, artificial but utterly precise. Pirates respond. Admiral Kessler's voice cracked over the comms. Static. Then silence. The ship's lights flickered. Idris's hands gripped the armrests of his chair as he scanned the flickering console displays. Every system was still online except for their weapons and communication array. They were being isolated. The inner bay was nothing like the organic nursery of the architects. This place was industrial. Mechanical. The walls shifted in calculated precision, moving in synchronization with their ship's arrival. It was like the Osiris had entered a factory, not a docking bay. The crew unbuckled, their movements slow, hesitant. Dr. Reyes peered out the viewport, her breath shallow. What is this place? Before anyone could answer, the ship moved again, not under its own power. Something took control of them. The Osiris descended deeper into the structure. Metallic corridors stretched out around them, expanding endlessly, geometric and unervingly precise. The further they went, the more they realized this wasn't just a ship. It was a station. Or worse, a manufacturing hub. Ren's knuckles were white against the control panel. I don't like this. Neither did Idris. Then, the Osiris stopped. The docking clamps latched onto their hull with a mechanical snap and the hatch unlocked. No atmosphere alarms. No pressure warnings. It was safe to exit. But safe for who? A new voice, different from the whispers of the architects, echoed through the ship. Not synthetic. Not alien. Human. Step forward, Captain Idris. We have much to discuss. The crew froze. The voice was impossibly familiar. Reyes's face went pale. That's impossible. Idris's heart pounded in his chest. He knew that voice. Because it belonged to him. A version of him. Somehow, somewhere he was already here. And he had been waiting. Across the void, beyond Neptune's orbit, the silent fleet stirred. Their forms were still indistinct, shifting between light and void, as if they existed in multiple states at once. They had been waiting for this moment. And now the pieces were finally moving. The architects were gone. The experiment was revealed. Earth was undefended. The fleet turned toward the inner solar system. And for the first time in thousands of years, the true masters of the cycle began their return. Captain Idris stepped forward cautiously, his crew flanking him. The ship's hatch had unlocked, leading to a dimly lit corridor of seamless, shifting metal. Every surface pulsed faintly, reacting to their presence as if the ship itself were aware. At the corridor's far end, a figure stood waiting. Familiar. Wearing an identical uniform to Idris. The same face. The same eyes. But something was wrong. This other Idris had a presence that felt calculated, his stance too perfect, too measured. His voice was calm, yet carried something deeper: authority. Welcome aboard. It's time you learned the truth. The real Idris stared at his duplicate, his breath uneven. Who are you? A flicker of something unreadable passed through the other Idris's expression. I am who you were meant to be. Had the architects not interfered. Reyes sucked in a sharp breath. You mean you're a version of him from an alternate timeline? The other Idris gave a slow shake of his head. Not a timeline. A correction. The room shuddered as if the ship itself was responding. You were not meant to evolve freely. Your world was not meant to be left alone. Ren's voice was hoarse. Then why were we? The other Idris's gaze darkened. Because the architects stole you. They took Earth out of the cycle, shielded you, hid you in a nursery, locked you away like an unfinished project. They thought they were protecting you. His lips curled slightly. They were wrong. Silence thickened around them. Captain Idris finally found his voice. And now what? You've come to set things right? The other Idris tilted his head. No. The true architects have. He gestured toward a screen embedded in the wall. It flickered to life, displaying a live feed of the solar system. Hundreds of ships, alien, ancient, precise, were moving past Neptune. Heading toward Earth. Ren swore under his breath. Oh my God. Reyes stepped forward, her mind racing. If they've had control all along, why are they moving now? The other Idris studied her for a long moment. Then quietly. Because your kind made a mistake. You left the nursery. You made contact. The screen shifted to an image of the Osiris, floating outside the Nebula of Hathor. Then to something else. A transmission. One single signal sent from Earth to deep space. A reply to the whispers of the architects. Reyes' stomach turned to ice. We sent a response? The other Idris nodded. And now they know where you are. A cold weight settled over the crew. The architects had shielded them. The real forces behind the cycle had been watching. Waiting. Now they were coming home. And they weren't coming as allies. Admiral Kessler stood before a massive tactical screen, his face pale. The unknown fleet was no longer idling beyond Neptune. It was accelerating. Dozens of officers scrambled around the war room, shouting calculations, updating projections. But it didn't matter. The trajectory was undeniable. Sir, one of the analysts called out, voice strained. They'll reach Earth in 16 hours. Kessler's fingers tightened into a fist. He turned to his communications officer. Activate every orbital defense system. Contact every world leader. We are at war. The officer hesitated. Sir, against who? Kessler's jaw clenched. Against whoever's really in charge of this damn universe. And far beyond Earth, past the flickering remnants of the Nebula of Hathor, the silent architects watched from the dark. They would not interfere. They had broken the rules once before. And now the true cycle was about to begin.